At what point in time does Tom Brady just slowly start elbowing Mark Davis out of the owner's booth, right? Where it's like
For
like
sure.
this all this season is going to be very much like there he is, there's Tom next to Mark. They're sharing a beer. Vegas. Oh, who's that beautiful woman in the box with him? Is that Tom Brady's new girlfriend? And then slowly by like middle of next season, it's just like, we haven't seen much of Mark Davis. I don't know what's going
He
on with
literally just
Mark.
disappears. Like no one hears from him ever again.
And
You know,
Tom just slowly just working him out. And all of a sudden, it's just more of Tom's friends and people. And then Mark's just in the back, like eating a hot dog, trying to get a view of the team. I don't even think Tom's going to ever buy it from Mark. He's just going to slowly, like, he's going to, like, outsmart Mark and do one of those things where it's like, what was it? The guy, in the Social Network where Justin
yeah,
Timberlake slowly is
just
pushing
dissolve his shares. You
yeah,
know, yeah,
just like all of a sudden,
just sell
all
them
of,
away.
all of a sudden, Mark's like, "Wait, I saw the team. Yeah, I know, Mark. Yeah, yeah, you still, yeah, right. Yeah, you're
I'm
still
most
here.
excited to see if Tom Brady is going to mirror Mark Davis's haircut,
Yeah,
and we're going to start seeing him really turn into the proper owner of the Las Vegas Raiders.
yeah.
With
I would be down for that. Or at
I have
what
a
point in
feeling.
time does Jimmy G just like text his agent, like, get me the out of here? I'm now Tom Brady's now my owner. You got to be kidding.
Hey, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg too for Tom Brady. I mean, we all knew that he was probably going to go into sports management at some point. This has obviously happened super fast. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a minority or a majority owner of the Las Vegas A's when they move
Yeah,
there. Maybe dip his pools into the Vegas Knights. Try maybe in the future they get an NBA team there. Vegas is obviously the hot spot right now for sports. Real
and
estate.
Tom's there.
So, I mean, with Tom Brady too, like you were mentioning, like he automatically is a great voice for, future investors as well. Like,
Oh my
oh,
God.
you want to come invest with Tom Brady? He's pretty smart business wise. So yeah, it'd be a good move.
My only question is like, how does this affect him with his deal with Fox? Like, it
No, yeah, that's a great point because I thought the
kind
same
of
thing. But
feels like he's just gonna probably maybe say no to that. Like, eventually, it'll just be, you know what, we agreed to this, but I'm gonna become a partial owner and I have other business ventures and thanks but no thanks. And Greg Olson gets to keep his job.
yeah, yeah, I mean that very well could happen. But at the same time, I think with the weight that Tom Brady brings to something, Fox would just have to not care. Be like,
Yeah, well,
that's fine. We'll just, but obviously, I mean, to your point, Tom would also just have to be wanting and willing to do it. And maybe he doesn't anymore. Or maybe he just does it for a couple of years and says, I'm fine with my situation as a business, investor and things like that. And I don't want to do analysis. But we as the fans would suffer. I've been looking forward to Tom Brady's analysis for a long time. But maybe he would just do it in a different capacity as well. He's not
yeah.
going to be maybe calling Vegas Raiders games, but they'll have him as a studio host to talk about, X, Y, and Z or something like that. I don't know how that would work. But yeah, if you're Fox, you do whatever you can to make this not be a conflict of interest.
Yeah, exactly right.
In the calling of these games. I mean, even Olsen, you could say, oh, you were a former player of the Panthers. Like, can you be biased or are you biased towards your former team? I mean, you could say that about a lot of teams. Obviously, it's different when your money's involved.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally an owner.
Yeah, you're actually, have a stake in it. But, well, we're excited to do this show. We pushed it to a Tuesday for good reason as well, because the NFL spring meetings were being held in Minnesota, and that's happening today as well. So the first couple of days of this week, and we already have some news for some major rule changes. So we're going to start the show off with that here on the Football Lounge today. Some notes as well from around the league, and then we're going to wrap things up later on in the episode with a couple lists that were really interesting. One of them being FanDuel's list of each NFL team's greatest of all time player.
Yeah,
Going to have
GOATs.
some issues with that. But interested to see what everyone's perspective is on that. But that should be a fun discussion. And then another list, which isn't subjective, it is showing each team's most recent 1,000-yard rusher. And there are some surprises in there. So kind of just something to quickly go over and show maybe how the league has changed and, just some surprises, like I said, in there of, wow, it's really been that long for these teams. So, a lot of these teams going to multi-running back backfields, that's a major indicator there of where the league is headed. But first, Mark, we'll go to these spring meetings that have happened the last couple of days, and some big rule changes, I would say. Maybe some that weren't as surprising, some were surprising. We'll start with the kickoff rule. I'm very glad this wasn't a part of the punt returns. I think that would be a disaster. But for kickoffs, fair catches are now going to automatically be placed at the 25-yard line, no matter where the fair catch takes place. So obviously, we've had the touchback rule in effect for quite some time. And more recently, it's been moved to the 25 instead of the 20.
Yeah.
We've had that for a few seasons now. But now the fair catch is going to be placed at the 25 as well. Obviously, this is, almost all the special teams coaches across the league were in vast, opposition to this rule. They don't. It's going to take kickoffs even more out of the strategic element of this game. Tom Pelissero reporting that the league models that they are citing for the reasons behind this say that it will likely reduce concussions and that it's going to reduce the number of kickoffs returned from 38% to 31%. And I'll just kick this to you. I think that's a very generous assumption of only a 7% decrease, because my guess, Mark, is we're going to see maybe 15% of kickoffs in this league returned. What say you?
Yeah, I lean towards agreeing with you there. I mean, obviously they have done all the data. They've watched every kickback and would be able to go in there and show this is one that a player would have ran it because, but now they would do it. And so you're only losing this amount percentage, where probably is where they get the 7. My biggest thing is, to me, eventually, I don't love the idea that you have the coin toss and then the winner just starts with the ball in the 25-yard line. There's something about the pageantry of the NFL and lining up the kick and like seeing that, all the lights and the zoom out, at the start of the Super Bowl. I think the kickoff will always be a part of the NFL. I truly believe that, because I think there's just a visual appeal to it. And in a way, I'm gaining more and more comfort with the fact that the kickoff is now one of those really unique plays. When you see a great kick return, it's so electric. Now it maybe happens once or twice a game, but could really change the tide of momentum in the game, or a game in and of itself, to where they are, even if it goes down to 15% of kicks returned, say we get as low as that. That's really an exciting still. It makes the play, when it actually happens, even more exciting, right? And it makes it even more electric if you have a Devin Hester type of returner who's just that dangerous and that much of a weapon. So I'm spinning this positively for myself in that way. And I also think that, again, the NFL, by doing this, buys themselves more time to allow that play to live in the game, which I think overall is just good for the visual, watching the game, the feel of the game, the representation of the game, right? That's how I feel.
No, I do. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's been a part of the sport since its inception, but beyond that, it has become so ingrained in starting off documentaries on
the look
with the first kickoff.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Super Bowl. Also, it's been just a cultural
kickoff weekend, like NFL kickoff weekend.
Exactly. That's what I was going to go to, is that it's a cultural reference now.
Yeah.
We have people saying, we're kicking off the annual barbecue fest down the road. Like, you're literally like, that phrase comes from this. So it's something that is probably always going to have to be in effect. I wouldn't be surprised if in a decade from now, the kickoff remains, but it's just done completely differently, where it's still called a kickoff and it still is a kickoff in many respects, but it just looks so much different. I agree with you. It's kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit for the NFL. It doesn't bother me a whole lot, to be honest with you. I know a lot of people were really upset with it. Doesn't bother me a whole lot just because we weren't seeing kick returns very much with the rule of the touchback rule going to the 25 in the first place. But like I kind of led with at the beginning, I think there's going to be a larger than a 7% decrease here because
Yeah.
any coach, any team that doesn't have an electric returner, which those are few and far between at this point, they're going to say if the kick is coming at the 5-yard line, in the past, you would have to return it because the odds of it bouncing into the end zone probably wasn't a risk that you were willing to take. You were going to take it and try and return it to whatever you could. Now it's don't return that. You're at the 5. You got to gain 20 yards on this kick return. Fair catch it. Coaches are going to plant that, in the heads of all their kick returners to say, unless you're fielding that at like the 15, you are not going to return that ball. But on the flip side, I mean, who's to say if we see a lot more squib kicks now in the league to try and say, well, can we just get it at the 15? And they can't fair catch.
If you have a great kicker who you believe in and special team coverage, you can be just as dangerous as the team with the electric returner.
Right. And that to me is the only thing where if the end goal is to reduce concussions, which I'm all for, if the squib kicks become like a mass, like that's the thing now, if it becomes that, I feel like concussions would go higher because now you got guys reaching at the ground with their heads down, trying to pick up a ball.
The NFL
and guys running at the full speed. So,
I agree. But again, we'll have to wait and see. I like it because again, it kicks the can down the road. It's the great phrase for it. It was what I was, trying to say. I didn't have the phrase for it. You're absolutely right there. Keeps the play alive in the NFL for the time being. And again, it connects us to college football as well. College won't get rid of it. I mean, college football still, it's that pageantry, it's the chance, it's the full on. I mean, it's such a look, it's such a thing.
Yeah. With the marching band kind of leading things off.
It really is something that I think it's important to the feel of the game. It helps you start the game. And so I think the NFL can sell this as we are working to make the game safer, but also every time you play football, whether you're DeMar Hamlin or whoever, there's a risk. Like there is a risk anytime anyone straps it up. So we are reducing the risk, but the game is still the game. So I think this fits into their narrative, right? The narrative they're trying to build. So I again, it's kind of funny. You forget about these things in the calendar. I had no idea the spring meetings were going on until all of a sudden Ian Rappaport is like unleashing all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa. I was still so focused on schedules and everything. It's like, oh, the NFL just keeps you. Here we are, the NBA Eastern Conference, Western Conference Finals, and the NFL is just dropping news left and right. Kudos to them. They know how to keep the Twitterverse and the sports spotlight on them.
Yeah, and with off-season training activities, otherwise known as OTAs, kind of kicking off as well in the league, we've just got new stuff happening, and so this kind of took a back seat almost, and was hard to miss or easy to miss, I should say. But there you go. We got some rules out of this thing, and so these are important meetings for sure. The competition committee works all year round for this day to have their votes, cast. And now we're seeing kind of the fruits of that labor. Another thing, Thursday Night Football. We talked about a couple weeks ago on the show about some of the flexing of games expanding to Monday Night Football, which had never been done before. Monday Night Football was always a static game that wasn't going to change no matter what. They now said from week 12 on that could be flexed.
13
now
there's 17. 4 possible 13, 15, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 5 possible games could get flexed.
For Thursday Night Football now. Monday Night Football was week 12 on.
That's
Thursday
right.
Night Football, week 13 on, or week 13 to 17. And so they are opening that up. That's a huge point of contention throughout the league on this one. 8 teams or owners otherwise voted against this, including the Bears and Steelers, which I'm, happy that our ownerships were part of that opposition. Yeah. I'm not a fan of that. I know Thursday Night Football has been brutal, and for a ratings perspective for the league, this is a huge win Now, the one caveat to all of this is that they obviously can't be flexed the week before. That would be too brutal to put on teams to
Yeah.
tell them you're moving to Thursday. It has to be a 28-day notice, and teams still cannot be flexed into Thursday night football more than once in a season, and they still can't play Thursday night football more than twice. So that
Yeah.
rule is still in place. You can't play those games more
It-
than twice in a season. But still, I mean, it's a big deal, and teams, are gonna find out. Oh, in 3 weeks, now we're playing Thursday when otherwise we were playing Sunday.
yeah. I honestly think there's the 5 games. It's week 13 at Seattle at Dallas. They're not flexing that. You have Dallas Cowboys, and Seattle's
Right.
supposed to be good, right? So they're not going to get flexed. You have Patriots Steelers, 2 gigantic brands the next week, both of which teams we both expect to be in that wild card hunt, especially week 14. I can't imagine that is going to get flexed. And then week 17 is Jets Browns, Aaron Rodgers, New York market. That one doesn't feel like a flex to me either late in the season. Jets Browns both battling for playoff spots, right?
Yeah, so that leaves us 2 games.
It's 15 and 16 to me. I'm like, okay, these are the ones I'd keep an eye out for. The 14 is December 14th, week 15 is Chargers at Raiders. Now, LA market, but not a huge. Chargers don't have a huge following. Raiders have a large following, but I think we both expect them to be not competitive for the playoffs this year. I think we'd both fair to say early on our thoughts are that way. So
Sure.
even if the Chargers are at this point in time 9 and 6, you know what I mean, or really a good team, or even better, say they're 12 and 3, and they're on a historic pace, whatever it might be. I don't know. That's one I would keep my eye out for. And then week 16, Saints at Rams. Now, if the Rams are rolling and the Saints are in playoff contention, I think this one is a possible keep, but it would be lower on my list of the other 3 keeps.
Sure. Yeah.
I think, listen, I like that I agree with you. I like that my owner voted against this because I think it's just too much for Thursday night football. But I like that if they agreed to flex them, they said, listen, this is going to be still really hard to find the right game, the right teams. You still got to predict it 3 weeks out, and you still can't be on Thursday night more than 2 times. So what is that going to mean? What games are actually even going to be available for the flex? I think it's going to be a small amount of games are actually available for the flex. And I think the Thursday night schedule this year is so much better that overall, when you get to that 3-week period, when you're 3 weeks out from Saints Rams, you're looking at going, well, the Saints are 6 and 5, and the Rams are 7 and 5 or 4 or whatever. It's like, well, the only other games we could do would be these 2 games, and those teams are. I think you're gonna have a lot of that, and the network's just gonna say, screw it, roll with it. You know what I mean? The only way I could see it is where I think this is a big thing for Jeff Bezos, where they basically put in, to me, what's called the caveat. This is the caveat rule. Stafford has a torn ACL week 5, Rams are out. You know what I mean? Like, now again, knock on all the wood. I don't want to curse your team, and then you'd be like Mark said. You know what I mean? But this is for that moment. If in any of those games, for whatever reason, we know for a fact big stars are not going to be playing. If Aaron Rodgers broken collarbone, I'm not going to knock on wood on that one. And he's supposed to be playing in this, and he breaks his collar. We know he's going to miss it. That's out. It's flexed. So I think it's really basically a big injury type flex. Is going to take that or disastrous seasons by one or more of the teams involved to be flexed, because I think 3 of the games are solid and 2 of them that are wishy-washy. A lot of it's going to depend on what else is even available at that time to flex.
Raiders owner Mark Davis was one of those that voted against it, and I don't know if you saw this, but he took a shot at the Chargers with his reasoning. He said, well, just imagine the Vegas Raiders at Los Angeles Chargers game where all of the Raiders fans get set to travel there, and all 3 Chargers fans getting ready for that game as well. And then it gets flexed and none of those fans could go. So just poking the bear a little bit at the rival, making fun of the Chargers' lack of a fan base. So I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, nonetheless, that's probably one of the games that would be on the chopping block, as you mentioned here. Another league rule, and this is one that I've been waiting for so long. Like, it doesn't make sense to not allow an emergency quarterback to be on the sidelines and not count against the roster cap. So,
Yeah.
real quick, just a recap, 53-man roster is what the teams are allowed to have as their active player rosters come season. That's what they have to chop it down to at the beginning of the season. And then on game days, only 48 of that 53 are allowed to be dressed and available to play. This has become an issue for some teams in recent years where they don't want to hold 3 quarterbacks and use up one of those valuable roster spots with a third quarterback who almost certainly is not going to play. But as we've seen, if starter gets hurt, backup gets hurt. Now they have Christian McCaffrey playing quarterback. Yeah. We end up with, what was his name? Kendall Hinton, I think, for the Broncos.
For the Broncos during
a couple
COVID.
Seasons ago, having to take snaps as the quarterback. So it's just a brutal situation all around. The league now has lifted the rule and said, okay, you can have a third quarterback active on game days and it won't count against your 48 player cap. And I think that's a great idea.
Basically, every team's job now is to go out and find their guy who they can basically just say, you're going to be our third guy every game this season. And it's great news for the Nathan Petermans of the world, for a lot of these undrafted rookies who are trying to make a name for themselves. It's great for the late round rookies who are drafted, who are trying to make a name for themselves, going to get to the practice squad, and then, hopefully have that chance. They're going to get to dress every game. I think it's a great rule. Don't let it count. The quarterback is really valuable. I wouldn't care if you had 4 quarterbacks and 2 of them don't count. Have as many bleeping quarterbacks as you want to dress them, and then limit your roster elsewhere. I mean, it's the way the world is right now. The quarterback is that important. And these
no one
games,
wants to watch those meaningful games with Christian McCaffrey throwing passes.
And all the NFL has to do is show, as soon as a quarterback and a backup go down, look at the ratings plummet probably too on that game. And alone, if your team still feels like they're a good team and they have a chance, the San Franciscos of the world, where they're just loaded rosters and it's like, hey, kind of anyone can give us a chance to win. It's the right move. For most teams, as soon as you get to the backup, your team's screwed anyways. Right. But when you get to that third string guy, you at least have someone who's capable of playing the position. It's not like in the NBA where if I lose my starting center and my backup center goes down, I can
you
move
just don't
a power
use a center.
I can move a power forward to center and play a little small ball, and at least the guy understands 90% of the position. Now he's maybe 2 inches shorter, and you're going to maybe get beat up on the block, but he can make a play. He understands the offense. He understands the defense. He knows how to, he probably played center in college and in high school. In the NFL, I mean, it's literally the most specialized position there is in sports, the quarterback. So this at least allows you to have someone who can go in there, call your plays, run your verbiage, and you at least looks like football, not Christian McCaffrey just having to run the Wildcat for 3 quarters. So this is a great rule. It is great for a lot of the Nathan Petermans of the world, the Trevor Simeons of the world, those type of guys who are just low-line career backups, just 6'2", can run the offense, type of guys. The Josh Johnsons of the world, who's now back apparently with the Ravens.
He's back, baby.
The Josh Dobbses of the world. It is great for all those guys. And it takes pressure off of the GMs, which at this point in time, again, a lot of these tweak moves are made for the television product. And that's what the NFL is basically saying, is we are a television product. And this is another move for that. And so I'm comfortable with.
Absolutely. Right in agreement with you on that one. Final note before we get to the list, Austin Eckler to return to the Los Angeles Chargers. Earlier this year, we heard that Eckler was requesting a trade.
Yeah.
Just didn't want to. Nothing was getting worked out in terms of a long-term deal there. He's going to be 28 years old next free agency period. So he will be a free agent come 2024, but he signs a 1-year. He's back on a 1-year deal with the Chargers here for this season, extra $2 million in incentives, and he will be on his way after that. So I mean, it's a good move. I mean, the Chargers get another year of that bridge where they can find the next guy. I mean, Isaiah Spiller was a highly touted rookie last year, didn't get much playing time. They usually are able to put some good running backs into the mix there. He's obviously a key player, but I think the Chargers get the best of both worlds here. They get 1 more year of prime Eckler before maybe the wheels start to fall off. I mean, he's going to be turning 30 pretty soon, and that's usually where they go on the downward trajectory of their careers. But we'll see. Maybe they also come to a long-term deal in the next year. And it buys them a little bit more negotiating time. But for the time being, he's back on a 1-year deal, and it doesn't kill them cap-wise.
It's a win. It's obviously a win for the Chargers. And for Austin Eckler, you get another guaranteed year of employment. You're going to probably make an extra $2 million. He's the type of guy that can hit incentives.
Yeah, he'll get those incentives.
Yeah. He's locked on up if he stays healthy. And here's the thing. If you're Eckler, it's very similar to Lamar Jackson situation. Basically, the team said, fine, all right, we're listening for trade offers. Go seek a trade. And it's crickets. It's crickets. And so it's a hard life lesson to learn in the NFL when you think you're desired and you learn quickly that you're not as desirable as you want. Now, it's also for Eckler, basically, it also gives him a little bit more of a boost to next year when he enters free agency. He has an idea a little bit more of what his own value will be, where he could go, and his expectations. Now, if he has another terrific season, he will be valuable to a team. He'll get a deal, but teams are not willing to make trades for those type of players and positions. It's just not the way the NFL is right now. Free agency, we saw with David Montgomery. You can get a deal. You can get a nice deal if you find the right suitor who's desperate and likes your body of work. And he's got a great body of work. It may still, young. Yeah, it may still be with the Chargers. But at this point in time, the Chargers are basically like, listen, Austin, you're running back. We ain't doing anything till we have to. Fine, go look for a trade. Oh, look, no one wanted to trade for you. Here's what we'll do for you. You hit this mark based on health. We will happily pay you an extra $2 million. Great. Bada boom, bada bing. Let's go out here and win some football games. It's a huge win for the Chargers. And for Eckler, I'm glad he gets a little bit more money. Hopefully he achieves his incentives. And I feel for the guy, but he's a good player. And hopefully he'll come into camp and be motivated to hit those incentives, those goals. And that's the way he can make more money going into next year as well.
Absolutely.
Justin Herbert's the real winner too. I mean, he needs a guy. He gets his guy back.
Yep. Yeah, they've got so many weapons there in Los Angeles. They just need to stay healthy throughout the season, and I think you and I both are pretty high on them if they're able to do so. All right, let's get to this list because this is very interesting. You sent this along to me last week.
It's a fun one.
Hey, this is something I would like to talk about in the show, and I agree. It's pretty interesting, a little polarizing. There's definitely some aspects of it I disagree with. So this is FanDuel. We'll show you here on the screen if you're watching YouTube. We'll have this up here. FanDuel created the list. It's titled Each NFL Team's GOAT. So greatest of all time for each NFL team. Now, Mark, what was your interpretation of that? Because I could see it going two different ways here. I could see them saying, this is the greatest player that this team has ever had.
Yeah.
Just in general. Or this is the best player that for this team at his specific time in his career and what he gave this team, right? So like that's where I think there's a little bit of a dichotomy.
It's a wiggle room
in here. And maybe that's where the disagreement will come from because you just don't fully understand what the criteria was. I'm guessing they were just saying who is just the all-around best player to ever play for this franchise, regardless of position or meaningfulness to that team in the time that they played.
Yeah. So example, and I think the best one that speaks to that is the Tampa Bay Bucks. They have Derek Brooks, Hall of Famer, great player. But if you're saying who's the greatest player to ever play for this team, well, it's obviously Tom Brady. But they went with Derek Brooks instead because I think so. What the list to me then by doing that shows that they're looking for more like longevity of career. When they became,
I think it has to be when you think of that player.
Yes,
This is because Reggie White played for multiple teams.
Yes, and the longevity of that person's career, and like Reggie White is the Eagles' GOAT.
Right. And that's where he started his career. It's where he created his
dominance.
brand.
But he was just as dominant, had a nice run with Green Bay.
No, that's very true.
So it's one of those interests. It's also to me interesting. So the Derek Brooks one to me was the one that like really kicked this off. Like, oh, okay, I see what FanDuel's doing here. So now let's open it up for interpretation. I wanted to ask you about just a couple here.
Well, how about this? Why don't we go through list by list and just
okay?
I'm sure there'll be plenty that we agree with, so we can we'll move on, right?
Yeah.
So let's just start like the top left with the.
You start and I'll read them off and we'll go with it. You lead it, right?
All right. So the Arizona Cardinals, they have Larry Fitzgerald. No argument for me.
Yeah, great.
Perfectly comfortable. Atlanta Falcons, Matt Ryan. I do have a little bit of pause there. Like for me, I'm tempted to go Julio Jones in terms of like, because I think Julio Jones is a bona fide Hall of Famer.
He's a Hall of Famer, yeah.
And I don't think Matt Ryan is. Matt Ryan's a Hall of very good. He changed the course of the franchise more, but Julio was the best player.
I would agree with you if you're talking about I think Julio Jones deserves that slot over Matt Ryan.
Yeah. Baltimore. That's a tough one, but they gave Ray Lewis, and I probably don't disagree there.
Yeah, I mean Ed Reed he certainly would maybe be the next closest.
Yeah.
Ray though is widely considered behind Butkus or with Butkus as the two greatest linebackers, Lawrence Taylor of all time. So I'm my thoughts on Ray. We've gone over this on this show, but even I would sit here and say Baltimore Ravens, I think the easy answer would be Ray Lewis.
Yep. Buffalo Bills, Bruce Smith. I agree. I mean, 200 sack club. That's hard to argue.
I mean, Bruce Smith's an all-time great player. And if Jim Kelly had won a Super Bowl, I think he'd be such a legend there.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to not go Jim Kelly, but I'm comfortable with Bruce Smith.
Cam Newton for the Carolina Panthers. I disagree with this one.
You do.
Okay. All right.
So my thought is, and I'll let you go, but my big thing is it's like Carolina, and when you think of them having their most success as a franchise and for the longest period of sustained success for the franchise, he was behind it all. He was the catalyst for it all, including the MVP season, the 15-1, the Super Bowl run. So with a franchise that doesn't have a ton of Hall of Famers, him getting the nod, I don't think it's slighted anyone. Does that make sense?
No, I don't think anyone would take, like offense to it or anything like that. I mean, it makes sense. I understand why they went this route. He's the guy that came in after several years of, just underwhelming performances and became an MVP, brought this team back to the Super Bowl. The only thing for me is if they had never gone to a Super Bowl, never had success before, and Cam Newton came in and turned everything around, I could understand that. But they had been there before, and Jake Delhomme took them there, was a very capable quarterback the years he was there. Steve Smith was, the classic, like undrafted or not undrafted, but, slept on guy that came in as an underdog and totally lit it up. For me, though, and for me, it was a toss between Julius Peppers and Luke Kuechly, and to me, it's Luke Kuechly. Like that's to me, Luke Kuechly is right there with Brian Urlacher as the greatest linebacker of this generation of the last 20 years. And I just find it like he's in a class of probably top 10 linebackers ever to play the game. And I don't see Cam in the top 25 quarterbacks to ever play the game. And
you're making a good argument. And I forgot about Peppers. I mean,
right. I mean,
shame on me. I would tend to lean Julius Peppers over Luke Kuechly.
Yeah, I could see that too. I could absolutely see that. I mean, either one of those guys, I think would
yeah,
qualify.
I'm comfortable with Cam, but I do think that if you were had Cam, Steve Smith, Luke Kuechly, or Julius Peppers, you can make the argument it's one of those four, and that's the Mount Rushmore of Carolina Panthers football in their short term as a franchise.
Right. So the Chicago Bears are next. We have Walter Payton. No, I don't think there's much of a disagreement.
The Bears have I mean, it's crazy. You think how many other names you could go with, but then Walter does stand above them all. Butkus, Urlacher, Singletary, Ditka, George Halas himself, you could just put on that list. But yeah, Walter is the easy one, and I think would be the most agreed upon for sure.
Anthony Munoz for the Cincinnati Bengals. One of the greatest guards to probably top 2 guard of all time.
He's the one person on this list where his time is running out, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
His time is limited.
Yeah, Joey B is quickly overtaking that. Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with you on that one. Maybe a couple more years, and I would absolutely say that he'll get bumped from the list. But I got to give some love to those linemen at some point. Jim Brown for the Browns. Pretty self-explanatory. RIP, by the way. Oh, man, we didn't even mention that. What a legend of the game and an advocate of the sport.
Should we just spend about 20 minutes talking about his police accusations, or should we? How we want to handle this?
Yeah, I don't know how we go about that. I think
that's one of those things. The internet is. I love the internet for so many reasons, and I hate the internet for so many reasons. And that is the perfect example. A legend dies. Overall, no one lives through life perfect, right? Maybe Mr. Rogers is the only person who lives and dies with a perfect resume. Jim Brown, what he did for the sport of football, what he did for the civil rights movement, the man is a legend. And if you want to start talking about, hey, everyone's got skeletons in their closet, that's fine. I understand it. No one's perfect. But the day he dies in the RIP, that's so much of that, the woke stuff. Jim Brown, legend, dies. Also, by the way, in the headline, let's include the fact that he was accused of rape and he was, it's like,
right. Yeah.
It's just like one of those things. I don't want to get involved with all that. But Jim Brown, RIP.
RIP. The Dallas Cowboys, Emmitt Smith is their selection.
I think this is another one where it's the one that makes the most sense, but I think Troy Aikman, when I think Dallas Cowboys, my brain kind of goes to Troy first.
Interesting.
But the problem is
I'd probably go Staubach, to be honest.
Staubach's the other one, but I think I'm just closer to, Staubach's the one who's probably had the most gripe about this. You could argue his resume and his importance, but my thought goes to Troy. But Staubach.
Hey, what about Ditka?
Ditka,
he was pretty good when he got traded, during those years.
I think Emmitt's probably the right decision, but I think Staubach and Aikman have a little bit of a gripe for sure.
I think Emmitt just breaking the record at the time that he did was it was such a monumental achievement that you kind of just have to give it to Emmitt Smith.
Yeah.
The run game was such a big part of their success. John Elway for Denver.
Duh.
Yeah, duh. No question. Barry Sanders for the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
I think
much as I love Megatron.
Yeah, I could also say like Night Train Lane. Like you could probably go Night Train Lane here, but Barry was so sensational, and he's still, in my view, probably the greatest running back ever. So yeah, I don't have too much issue with that. Green Bay, they go Aaron Rodgers on this one.
Despicable. Disgusting. Where's the love for Bart Starr? History.
Right?
Well, I'll be honest.
It's kind of true, though. It's kind of true.
I personally, and this, I think Packers fans would be comfortable, especially with all the recency bias, being very comfortable with either Brett Favre or Bart Starr's name being there. But I think the fact that you have Aaron's name there is just, again, I think it's great for the content of it. I'm sure that got a lot of the retweets and everything.
Yeah.
But if you're asking me, I favor Favre over Rodgers, and as far as the greatness of the player. And so I would go with Favre, but FanDuel chose Rodgers.
Yeah, I'd probably choose Rodgers at the end of the day, to be honest, just because I think he's the better player. But they both had underwhelming overall careers when you look at the lack of success in championships. But
That standard is
J,
higher.
yeah, J.J. Watt is the Texans selection.
Good one.
Pretty easy choice there. It's
Yeah.
not going to be David Carr, that's for sure. Peyton Manning for the Colts.
Boom. Easy.
Easy one. Fred Taylor for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I would be okay with
You want Trevor Lawrence here, don't you?
Well,
I'm just kidding.
Again, his time's running out here.
He'll be there.
I would be okay with that's why I would have been okay with the tackle Tony Baselli. Like he just got in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
He's Fred Taylor's not a Hall of Fame running back. He's a Hall of very good.
See, I think he should be in the Hall of Fame though, to be honest. I
mean maybe, but
again, such bad teams overall. I mean, they had some good years, but
first
overall,
ballot Hall of very good. But because I feel like this will eventually have been Trevor Lawrence, I think this is one of those moments where you could have honored a lineman again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, hey, maybe by the end of his career, Jalen Ramsey might be considered. I mean,
he just didn't last long enough.
Didn't have that long of a career with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But
I will say, every team's goal should be for it to be a quarterback at the top of their list. You know what I mean?
Oh, of course. Yeah,
because if you have a quarterback at the top of your list, that means that guy probably won a Super Bowl, if not multiple, and an MVP, if not multiple. And then you can really only teams like, the history of a team like the Cowboys, or like we'll get to later with the Niners, had so much success from position players while also winning Super Bowls that you don't argue too hard against the position player over the quarterback. But kind of the goal would be, as a fan base, be like, I hope that I have a quarterback at the top of this list, because that means we won some Super Bowls.
For sure. All right, going to the right column now for the
Patrick
Oakland
Mahomes,
Raiders, or
Patrick Mahomes' last one, and I think that's
fair.
yeah,
sorry, yeah, I missed that one. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes for the Chiefs.
Tony Gonzalez maybe would have had still a say even a couple years ago, but at this point it's Mahomes. 2 Super Bowl victories, the greatest stretch of winning in the history of their franchise.
Len Dawson was probably the only other one in consideration, but it's definitely Mahomes for sure. Marcus Allen for the Raiders.
Yeah,
and that's an interesting one. It's hard to argue with that.
I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, same here. I mean, if maybe the snake, Kenny Stabler would be someone I'd put in there in contention, but Marcus Allen's was so good at running back. Kenny Stabler was good.
Yeah.
And a Hall of Famer, but I just in terms of the importance at their particular positions, Marcus Allen probably takes
I agree.
Interesting one, and I probably can't disagree. LaDainian Tomlinson for the Chargers.
So I agree with this choice, but again, I'm an era of LaDainian Tomlinson is probably the greatest running back that I've ever seen their whole career with my 2 eyes. Because he started early 2000s when we started watching football, and he is now his career is over. I think LaDainian Tomlinson, I think when we did that running back list, I had him as a top 5 back of all time. I think you did as well. To me, Kellen Winslow is the one with the real argument to maybe try to fight the resume with resume, greatness of position, but I'm comfortable with this one.
Yeah, I mean, Fouts was another one I'd throw in there that definitely was in contention.
If Fouts had a ring or 2, I would. Yeah. But again, to me, with the quarterback, it's kind of the Matt Ryan argument. If a guy who's in the Hall of, now Fouts is a Hall of Famer, but again, if Fouts had his career today, would Fouts be a Hall of Famer? Probably not. So a guy who really maybe belongs in the grand scheme of things in the Hall of Very Good, if they're at the top of your list, then your franchise, it just goes to show, like the Chargers, like the Falcons, not historically all-time great winning franchises.
Yeah, for sure. All right, the Rams goes to Aaron Donald.
Yeah, this one is tougher to swallow just because it's active and it is a historic franchise. You think of Eric Dickerson, some great players, but I think Aaron Donald, when it's all said and done and he's played his whole career with the Rams, is the greatest player in Rams history. He's got the most hardware. He's got a Super Bowl ring. He's a beast. He's an animal. He's a freak.
For me, my vote is Kurt Warner. And that's because he was a part of the, not just his story, but the resurrection of he's the guy that created the greatest show on turf. Marshall Faulk is a tough one to square with that too.
Yeah.
Those are both, I think, because Warner played the position of quarterback and he did it well. Hall of Fame career, started late, resurrected the Rams, got them 2 Super Bowl wins.
Yeah. Well, 1 win, 2 appearances.
Or 1 win. I'm sorry. Yeah. And 2 appearances.
My thing would be if it was Kurt Warner's name on this list and not Aaron Donald's, I would use that, would be one of my first things to be like, whoa, come on, Aaron Donald. That's Aaron Donald disrespect.
Yeah, I could.
How many times defensive player of the year now? It was 4-time defensive player of the year, Super Bowl champion. I mean,
now he's like the most dominant player at his position that the Rams have ever had.
Kurt Warner is not a top 10 quarterback of all time. He's fringe.
Right.
Aaron Donald is is probably a top 10 defensive player of all time, let alone defensive tackle. I mean, he's top 3. So
sure.
I think that's why I feel comfortable with that. Dan Marino with the Dolphins. That's an easy one, right?
Yeah, no question. Randy Moss to the Vikings.
Easy one.
I disagree with it. For me, man. And
Chris Carter?
No.
Adrian Peterson?
It was a tie, and I'm just going with my preference. He's actually on the one of my shelves over there. It was between Jim Marshall and Fran Tarkenton, and I'm going Fran Tarkenton.
You do love Fran.
I love Fran Tarkenton, man. Scrambling Fran. The guy was so good.
I just think to myself, Randy Moss, in my opinion, is the most talented wide receiver in the history of the game. And Randy Moss, when he was at his peak and played a lot of years in his prime, is a Minnesota Viking. So I'm able to just be comfortable with that. But again, that'd be another one. If it was Fran, I would feel like, oh, come on, Randy. It's Randy. So that's where my gut just goes on it. But I don't hate it. If you were to change it to Fran,
I have some bias there. I'm just a big Fran Tarkenton fan.
The next
Tom
3
Brady Brady to the Patriots, no question. Breeze to the Saints, no question. Lawrence Taylor for the Giants, no question.
Yeah.
And we get to the Jets.
The Jets, this one is hard. Darrelle Revis. I mean, he'd be on my short list, but I guess my problem is, I'll be honest with you, I can't think of like the all-time greatest Jet.
Yeah, I mean, Namath is when I still think of Jets, I think Namath. Like the Jets
I agree.
Still in my head, and that might just be because it's been that long since they've won. And so the guy who had all of the publicity and was the, Broadway Joe.
Namath, Curtis Martin, and Darrelle Revis are kind of the 3 names for me.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm trying to think right now,
it's going to be a Jets fan who's yelling at us and trying to think of someone else that we're maybe missing, Jets Hall of Famers. But Darrell's fit. I'm fine with it because again, there's no one.
He's such a shutdown dominant corner in an era where those are harder to come by. Certainly think that he is probably the best at his position than any other Jet at their position. So that makes sense. I get it. But Joe is the one that gave them their one and still only Super Bowl win.
Yeah.
So it's hard to come off of that. Reggie White for the Eagles. I don't think there's much disagreement there, right?
Reggie White has to be on this list, and I think he does lean towards more the Eagles career than the Packers. Even though his career was almost 50-50, you could argue with them. I will say, though, there are a lot of Eagles who are close. The Brian Dawkins of the world, the Donovan McNabbs of the world. I think Donovan McNabb
Terrell Owens,
historically underrated. I think that guys like offensive linemen now, like modern, the Kelseys, the Lane Johnsons. I mean, there's going to be guys who it's a franchise, but because again, their one Super Bowl win was with a backup quarterback. But when if you quantify the modern Eagles success, say the Eagles win a Super Bowl this year, like Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson, if they're healthy and like dominant for it, those are two Hall of Fame offensive linemen who won 2 Super Bowls with a franchise. Like,
Yeah.
I could start to see them really push Reggie, because Reggie, not because they're better than Reggie. Reggie is one of the greatest 10 players of all time, but Reggie really, his career was almost 50-50. And maybe because it's 60-40 Eagles Packers, you lean towards the Eagles and you say, leave it at that. You move on. I don't think Eagles fans are upset seeing that.
Yeah, agreed. For the Steelers, they have Mean Joe Green.
I was really interested in this one because if you would have asked me to do this list without seeing the list, Mean Joe probably would have been in the top 4, but I don't think he would have been my number 1. I think I probably, to be honest with you, would have gone Terry Bradshaw. I think Big Ben would be in that top 4. And then I get to Lambert, Mean Joe Green, and some of those great defensive players with the Steel Curtain. But like Bradshaw, to me, I mean, he won 4 Super Bowls. Like, and he was the quarterback of them all. And again, now we look at Bradshaw's career and we think, well, he's not even Jay Cutler numbers wise. But in the era he did it, like Fouts in the era he did it, he was the epitome of a franchise quarterback and a star.
You could argue, though, that Mean Joe was a part of that first draft class that changed
everything. Yeah, I agree. No,
the Steelers' defenses are what drove those championships, right? And so he was the leader of the unit that won 4 championships. Not to say that Bradshaw and company didn't perform very well in 2 of those games for sure, like dominated, but you know, he was the quarterback of those teams in terms of what dominant streaks were led, and I had him as one of the greatest defensive players of all time, you know, top 5 for me.
No, I'm
so
not
I had no issue with it.
All right, good. I'm just checking in.
I would put Ben over Bradshaw in that running, however.
He's got 2.
Because Ben got 2, went to 3. Ben was overall like certainly a better talent. Like I think if you put Ben on those teams, he would have torn it up.
But I just also think like when you're talking about the GOAT for a team, it is an interesting thing where Bradshaw,
they are interesting conversations.
4. Bradshaw wouldn't think he's the GOAT. He would lean towards his defensive guys for sure. Because that's kind of guy.
Franco. I mean, people would say Franco. Mel Blount.
Well, and then you have modern guys like a Troy Polamalu. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. So the Steelers are one of those similar to the Bears, where it's like they have better quarterbacks, but reality they have these insane position players who are just so dominant for them in the historic franchises, similar to like Washington, similar to the Giants. I mean, we didn't even bat an eye. It's not Eli. It's Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like these are some of these long historic franchises. The Packers are the opposite. They are the long historic franchise with 3 quarterbacks you'd list above any position player. So it's just it's that kind of interesting flip flop of the dichotomy of it. But all right, I'm comfortable with that. And now the San Francisco 49ers, Jerry Rice. My immediate thought would be Joe Montana.
Right. Yeah, you would think. Yeah. But I agree with the pick actually. But I also agree with you. Like your initial thing.
If I was making this list, I would go Joe Montana, and I'd feel dumb to not have Jerry Rice on a list of GOATs. But this is different from the Julio Jones, Matt Ryan thing. Like,
right? Yeah, it's
Joe won MVPs. Joe won Super Bowl MVPs. Joe has 4. Joe was considered the overall GOAT quarterback until 15 years ago when Peyton Manning and Tom Brady started exploding on this league. Joe is still considered the GOAT over Dan Marino, who statistically passed him. So I would put Joe, and I would be willing to take whatever grief I get for it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't argue with you very much. It's the 49ers have a storied history, but it's Joe Montana and Jerry Rice that drove the ship. I mean, Jerry just still to this day is light years ahead of any other receiver in terms of the hierarchy of the position. So I can understand why.
Well, and to me, in terms of he's different. It's different from the Emmitt Smith debate. Emmitt Smith, you can watch his career and understand how he's the all-time leading rusher, but still, I think most people, when push comes to shove, would choose at least 3 guys before Emmitt Smith: Peyton, Sanders, Brown. All of them, like 90. I think 90% of football fans, especially non-Cowboys fans, can easily say that, right?
Sure.
Jerry has the stats, and it's very hard to argue he's also not just the most talented, greatest receiver of all time. There are guys who physically are freaks, the Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson, Randy Mosses, who I can sit there and with my eyes just go, well, I've never seen anything like them compared to Jerry Rice. But Jerry gets the nod for the longevity. Jerry and Tom are very similar. Like Jerry and Tom are hand in hand. They have all the records. They are more than talented enough, but we'd all argue there are people we've seen that are just more freakishly talented than them at their positions. But GOAT is GOAT. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Russell Wilson is their choice for the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah. Do you disagree?
I mean, I'm fine with it. I'm not again, kind of like with the Jets. Like I don't have enough Seahawks like crazy depth of knowledge to be like, no, this is a sham. This so and so got screwed.
Yeah.
When I was trying to think of people, I think he's the kind of okay. I'm comfortable with the choice. If a Seahawks fan wants to let us know they're offended and they should be this player instead, give us the reason why, I'm willing to listen.
Yeah, I could only think of Steve Largent as being someone that maybe you could put into that conversation.
Him and Marshawn Lynch and maybe Bobby Wagner.
Alexander.
Those are the 3 that I'd be like, okay.
Yeah, you could understand it. We already talked Derek Brooks with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're good with that overall. Warren Moon for the Titans / Houston Oilers. This is a tough one because I thought Earl Campbell instantly. But man, Warren Moon did have like that underrated quarterback career longevity, kind of broke the mold in a lot of ways. So it is tough to come, Billy White Shoes Johnson's there too. I can't really think of any defensive guys that you're like, have to be in that list.
Again, it's a tougher one to do, and it's the 2 franchises, and there's such a weird divide between them both.
You could think of McNair as the one that got them to the Super Bowl.
If you ask me Titans, my thought when I think of the Titans, I don't think of the Oilers at all. Like I really don't.
Yeah.
So I would technically lean towards probably a Steve McNair would have been my vote if I was just doing this. Like but if you just said, wait, what about the Oilers? Once you include Warren Moon, Earl Campbell, Steve McNair, then I'm like, all right, pick your poison, whichever one you want, I'm good with. And let's move on. You know what I mean?
They probably got it right, but it's Earl Campbell would be a very close second for me.
Yeah.
For Washington, Darrell Green, obviously, like he's one of the more underrated players probably ever. But you talk about Washington, that
John Riggins,
like you think of John Riggins, I think of Joe Theismann.
Yeah.
They had a bunch of unknown dominant offensive linemen, right? The Hogs during that time. They've had a lot of great players come through over the years, but Darrell Green probably was the greatest at his position, a corner. But I don't know. I mean, I just don't think Darrell Green when I think of like Washington's greatest.
Yeah, that would have it would have been a struggle for me, and I'm comfortable with it. It's another one of those I want a Commanders fan to reach out and be like, here's who I would have done instead, or make the case for Darrell Green. Because I think of it, if you would have just asked me off the top of my head, Washington football player, greatest of all time, Riggins is the name that comes to my head. Like I can see him running in the NFL films.
Yeah, right.
Carrying the ball
against the Dolphins in that Super Bowl run.
You know what I mean? The crossbar face mask, those the greatest of times for that franchise. So that's probably where I would have just gone. I would have felt comfortable with it. And then someone would have brought up Joe Green and be like, oh yeah, well, okay.
You remember Chris Cooley?
Oh, Chris Cooley, yeah, tight end.
He was awesome. I loved him. He wouldn't be in the top 4 or 5 on this, but I was just a name that popped in my head. Sean Taylor, if he
Sean Taylor
had a full career, probably would have been on this here.
I don't hate it.
All right. Well, we're wrapping up on time, so just quickly go over some of these things that stood out from this 1,000-yard rusher list.
Yeah, this is a good
Because
one.
this is going back to every team's most recent 1,000-yard rusher, and a lot of these teams have had ones in the last few years, but a couple that stood out. I mean, the Dolphins. It's been since 2016 with
Jay
Jay Ajayi. Mark Ingram for the Saints. I mean, they've had Alvin Kamara with great years recently. He's the most recent 1,000-yard rusher for them in 2017.
Yeah,
Doug Martin for the Buccaneers.
Yeah, Frank Gore.
2015.
Frank Gore 2014 for the Niners. That one got me.
And that one got me too, because I'm thinking the 49ers are amazing at running the ball, but they're amazing at having 8 guys run the football for 400 yards each. That was an interesting one. Chris Ivory, we forget how dominant he was for that season and a half with the New York Jets. He's the most recent one for the Jets, 2015 as well. So a few of these teams, it's been back nearly 8 years since they've had a 1,000-yard rusher. That's
1,000-yard rushers are hard to come by. But then there were surprises in a good way. Like, I forgot Travis Etienne rushed for 1,000 yards for the Jags this year. That's awesome. Like, no wonder they had a good year. Like,
Jamal Williams for the Lions.
For the Lions, yeah. Like, I need Travis Etienne to rush for another 1,000 yards this year. Like, that needs to happen. Teams I'd be concerned about a little bit too. Like, all right, let's find our run game. Bills, 2017, LaShawn McCoy. What has struggled for them? The run game. Chiefs, 2017, Kareem Hunt. Okay, let's work on that run game. Let's build that run game. Let's find Patrick Mahomes his go-to. And the Chargers, Melvin Gordon, 2017. I've said it with Justin Herbert. Like, he is becoming Josh Allen, where it's like, if he's not amazing and his wide receivers aren't amazing, they just don't have anything. And we talked about with Austin Eckler, but he's a different kind of running back. He's not a 1,000-yard rusher running back. So those would be on the other side of it. It's an interesting list. And then you do realize how many 1,000-yard rushers we had last year. Kenneth Walker, Derrick Henry, Najee Harris, Miles Sanders,
Justin Fields,
Dalvin Cook, Ramondre Stevenson, Saquon, ETN, Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, Tony Pollard. There's a lot of 1,000-yard rushers this year.
Tyler Algier's on that list.
Yeah, Justin Fields, Nick Chubb. So the running game is still really important. Having a 1,000-yard rusher is a luxury, and finding guys. To me, it's not about finding the guy anymore. It's about making sure your scheme is right, your offensive line is right, and you put your team in an ability to have a 1,000-yard rusher. That's something the Bills don't do. That's something the Chargers don't do. Something the Chiefs don't do. Now, have those teams been fairly successful and really successful over the past course of years? Yes, but it's because they have 3 of the top 5 quarterbacks of all time. But even then, only one of those teams has won a Super Bowl. That's the Chiefs, and they have the greatest quarterback. So the run game and having an established, a great run game, it's important. Baltimore's last one was Lamar. They're a team that needs to find a 1,000-yard rusher. They need to go find their Ramondre Stevenson. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's something that popped in my head, too, when I was looking at this list. It came to the realization that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are really good at getting a running back that's really good for 2 years. Like they had Cadillac Williams. Mike Allstott had a probably a longer run. So
but he was really a fullback.
And he was a fullback. Doug Martin, LeGarrette Blount, Leonard Fournette, these guys who are good for a couple years, but then just kind of tail off and don't really pan out. It's just kind of funny. Tampa Bay just hasn't been able to get that one guy that's there for, because even Houston had Arian Foster for several years, Adrian James for the Colts. They've had guys that strung together several years. Fred Taylor and Maurice Jones-Drew for the
You're
Jags.
right. In modern times for the Bucs, they have spurts, but they don't have a guy who's with a 5 or 6 year stretch.
Well, probably in their history, I can't think of a classic Buck that was a great running back either.
The Bears are really good at finding 2-year guys as well. I mean, it's Jordan Howard.
Yeah, but Matt Forte though was
Matt Forte, and then it was the kid out of Michigan State. He had 1 year, and then it was they went right to Jordan Howard, who had 3 years, and then they went right into Montgomery, who had 3 years.
Who was
kid out of Michigan State guy? I know, I can't think of his name now.
I can't. Oh man, because I know there was 1 good year,
and then he fell off the map, and he wasn't in the NFL anymore. But your team can do that. That's fine. I'm comfortable with that. And it looks like now, Roshan Johnson's the next one for the Bears, with they're going to fill him in and he'll have a 2 or 3 year stint and they sign a new one. That's a good way to go about keeping your running back position.
Well, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're
Keep
not
it
ever
fresh
committing huge money to them.
Exactly.
But if you do find a guy like Matt Forte, then you do want to keep him and sign him. So the running back, that was an interesting list. It did shock me when, first off, how long it's been for certain teams, like Frank Gore for the Niners. Like, come on, the Niners. But then it also does shock you how many 1,000-yard rushers you had last year.
Yeah. It's literally both sides of the coin. It's like, wow, yeah, the running back position has been devalued in recent years. But then at the other side, it's like, no, they're still like really good, laudable 1,000-yard rushers that are meaningful to their teams. Teams are just finding ways to get that 1,000 yards out of multiple ways, whereas it used to be just one bell cow guy. I was, the last surprise I'll mention was the Cardinals with David Johnson, just because James Conner had 18 touchdowns 2 years ago, and I could have swore he rushed for 1,000 yards that year, but he didn't. I mean, it's interesting to see, but yeah, that's kind of wrap it up. For us here. But I'll let you get a final word in here.
Like even in the Adrian Peterson, the last dominant pure running back.
Yeah.
Because the NFL does not have that anymore. Like he would have 1,800 yards and like 200 yards receiving. Now it's you have 1,050 yards rushing, but you have 600 yards receiving. Like that's the back you want now. Like that is the David Montgomery. That is the prototypical
McCaffrey. And
yes. I mean, McCaffrey's and then some, but that is the back you want now. I mean, even Derrick Henry is valuable in the screen game. Like he has,
he's great.
In his 2,000-yard season, he probably still had over 400 or 500 yards receiving. Like if you're running backs, if you're trying to give him the ball 20 plus times a game, you also need, and that running back ends the season with less than 200 yards receiving, you'll look at him as not valuable.
Yeah. I'd say the one exception is probably Nick Chubb. He doesn't do much in the receiving game, but that's also because they've had Kareem Hunt there, and he's that guy for them. But they're few and far between for sure. So these are two interesting lists to look at, and we love lists, so we had to insert something here on the Football Lounge for that during this off-season edition. But we had some great rules, so this has been a jam-packed show, and looking forward to seeing what comes around next week for us here to talk about. So stay tuned for that. But this is the Football Lounge with Mark and Dan signing off until next time.